They called it the Crimson Dawn. The day when humanity's supercarrier, the Defiance, emerged from hyperspace like a vengeful god, dripping with the blood of 1,000 battles. I, Korvash, of the 8th Fleet, witnessed what no Zelathi commander should ever have to see: the complete annihilation of our superiority complex in under 6 hours. But let me back up, because this story starts 3 cycles earlier, when we thought humans were just another primitive species ripe for conquest. Admiral Vorthak stood on the bridge of our flagship, the Inevitable, his 4 arms crossed in what we considered a gesture of absolute confidence. His crimson eyes scanned the tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses, and his mandibles clicked in what passed for Zelathi laughter. "Look at them," he hissed, his voice carrying the arrogance of a species that had conquered 47 worlds without breaking a sweat. "Their largest warship barely reaches 2 kilometers. Our smallest destroyer is 3 times that size." I nodded, my own confidence bolstered by the sight of our magnificent armada. 500 vessels of the Zelathi Dominion, each one a masterpiece of engineering and destruction. We had plasma cannons that could crack moons, shield generators powerful enough to withstand stellar flares, and armor plating forged from the cores of dead stars. The humans? They had metal tubes floating in the void, held together by what appeared to be primitive welding and sheer stubborn determination. Their weapons looked like they belonged in a museum, and their formation was so loose it seemed accidental rather than tactical. "Sir," Communications Officer Thylex announced, his 3-fingered hands dancing over his console, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through," Vorthak commanded, probably expecting some pathetic plea for mercy. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with short-cropped auburn hair and steel-gray eyes that held not a trace of fear. She wore a uniform that looked practical rather than ceremonial, and her expression suggested she had better things to do than chat with alien invaders. "I'm Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge with unsettling calm. "You have exactly 30 seconds to turn your fleet around and leave our system before we demonstrate why that's in your best interest." The bridge erupted in what humans might have called laughter, but which sounded more like the dying screams of 1,000 tortured souls. Vorthak's mandibles spread wide in what was definitely amusement this time. "Human?" he replied, his translator making his voice sound like grinding metal. "Do you have any idea what you are facing? We are the Zelathi Dominion. We have reduced entire civilizations to ash. Your species hasn't even mastered basic energy shielding." Admiral Vasquez checked what appeared to be a chronometer on her wrist with theatrical precision. 20 seconds. "Perhaps you didn't hear me," Vorthak continued, his tone shifting from amused to irritated. "We have 500 ships, each one capable of sterilizing your entire planet. You have what? 50 vessels that look like they were built in someone's garage." 15 seconds, Vasquez said, and now there was something in her eyes that made my spine ridges twitch with unease. "You might want to scan beyond the asteroid belt, Admiral. Just a suggestion." Vorthak gestured dismissively with one of his 4 arms. "Scan what could possibly be hiding in that debris field that would concern us." "More of your primitive vessels?" 10 seconds. Vasquez counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. She paused, and for a moment the only sound on our bridge was the low hum of life support systems and the nervous clicking of mandibles. 1, she said, and smiled. That's when every sensor on our fleet simultaneously exploded into alerts that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my considerably shortened life expectancy. The asteroid belt didn't just light up on our sensors. It erupted like a miniature star going nova, but instead of random debris, our computers started identifying massive energy signatures that defied everything we thought we knew about human technology. "Sir," sensor operator Gorfax's voice cracked with panic. "Contact emerging from the asteroid field. Mass readings are… This can't be right." "What is it?" Vorthak demanded, his earlier confidence evaporating faster than atmosphere through a hull breach. It's 12 kilometers long, sir, and 8 kilometers wide. Energy output is off our scales. Sir, it's bigger than our entire command division combined." The thing that emerged from behind the asteroids wasn't just large. It was impossibly, horrifyingly, beautifully massive. The human supercarrier Defiance slid into view like a mobile city designed by engineers who had clearly never heard the phrase budget constraints. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage from conflicts we couldn't even imagine, and weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some primordial beast. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when our computers finished analyzing the energy signatures and determined that this single vessel was outputting more power than our entire fleet combined. Impossible, Vorthak whispered, his forearms now hanging limp at his sides. How did they hide something that massive? Admiral Vescas was still on the screen and her smile had grown wider. Oh, that's not hiding, Admiral. That's just Tuesday. Would you like to meet the rest of the family? Before anyone could respond, space around the Defiance began tearing itself apart. Not metaphorically, literally. Holes in reality opened like wounds, and through them came ships that made the Defiance look like an escort vessel. The Unbreakable emerged first, its 15-kilometer length bristling with weapons that our computers couldn't even categorize. Then came the Retribution, smaller at only 10 kilometers but somehow radiating an aura of violence that made our weapons systems whimper in their housings. How many? Vorthak asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 17 supercarriers, sir, Korvash reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. Each one larger than anything in our fleet. And sir, they are launching fighters. The tactical display lit up like a festival of death as thousands of small craft poured from the human ships. But these weren't the primitive fighters we had expected. These were sleek predators that moved with purpose and precision, their energy signatures indicating weapons that could punch through our heaviest armor. Admiral Communications Officer Thylax called out, his voice shaking. The humans are broadcasting again. Put it through, Vorthak ordered, though he sounded like he was ordering his own execution. Admiral Vasquez appeared on screen again, but now the background showed the bridge of what was clearly the Defiance. The scale was staggering. Her bridge crew numbered in the hundreds, and the command center stretched beyond the edges of the screen. Admiral Vorthak, she said, consulting what appeared to be a data tablet. I see you have noticed our defensive fleet. Now I'm going to explain something to you that apparently wasn't covered in your intelligence briefings. She stood up from what must have been a command chair, and the camera followed her as she walked to what looked like a tactical display that covered an entire wall of the bridge. Humans, she continued, have been fighting each other for longer than your species has had spaceflight. We have perfected warfare in ways that would give your strategist nightmares. We have built weapons designed to kill things we haven't even met yet, and we have been preparing for this day since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back. The tactical display behind her showed a real-time view of our fleet, with targeting solutions already calculated for every single vessel. You see, Admiral, we have been watching you. We know about the 47 worlds you have conquered. We know about your tactics, your weapons, your fleet compositions. We have studied every battle you have ever fought, and we have identified 17 distinct weaknesses in your standard attack formation. Vorthak's mandibles clicked nervously. What do you want? What do I want? Vasquez laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. I want you to turn around and leave. I want you to go back to whatever rock you crawled out from under and spread the word that Earth is off limits. But more importantly, I want you to understand something crucial about human nature. She walked closer to the camera, and her gray eyes seemed to look directly at each of us on the bridge. We don't fight fair, she said softly. We don't honor ancient codes of warfare. We don't limit ourselves to civilized weapons or tactics. When something threatens our home, our families, our way of life, we become something that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. The most efficient killers in the known galaxy. The display behind her shifted, showing detailed scans of our ships that revealed vulnerabilities we didn't even know we had. Your plasma cannons are impressive, she continued, but they require a 17-second charging cycle, and they are vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. Your shields regenerate quickly, but they can't handle rapid frequency modulation. Your armor is strong, but it has molecular weak points at the joint connections. Horror crept up my spine as I realized she was describing classified information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. How? Vorthak managed to ask. How do we know all this? Vasquez smiled again, and this time it was predatory. Because for the past 6 months we have been conducting detailed reconnaissance of your fleet using technology you can't detect. We have analyzed the electromagnetic signatures of every system on every ship. We have mapped your communication protocols, identified your command structure, and calculated the exact force required to disable each vessel with minimum expenditure of ammunition. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the tactical display changed to show firing solutions that covered our entire fleet. We don't just fight wars, Admiral. We engineer victory. We stack every advantage, exploit every weakness, and then we apply overwhelming force with surgical precision. It's not honorable. It's not noble. And it's definitely not sporting. But it wins wars. The bridge fell silent except for the increasingly frantic beeping of our sensor arrays as they detected more and more human vessels decloaking throughout the system. Sir, Korvash whispered, I'm counting over 300 ships now. And sir, they are not just in front of us. The main display shifted to show our tactical situation, and my blood turned to ice. We were surrounded. Completely, utterly surrounded. Human vessels had emerged from hiding spots throughout the system, creating a sphere of firepower that enclosed our entire fleet. You walked into a trap, Vasquez confirmed, reading our expressions with disturbing accuracy. Did you really think we would let you approach our homeworld without preparation? Did you imagine that a species capable of interstellar travel would be defenseless? Vorthak's 4 arms trembled as the reality of our situation finally penetrated his arrogance. What are your terms? Terms? Vasquez laughed, and it echoed through our bridge like the sound of grinding bones. Oh, Admiral, I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a negotiation. She nodded to someone off-screen, and suddenly every human ship in the system opened fire simultaneously. But they didn't fire at us. Instead, they targeted the 3 asteroids that had been drifting harmlessly near our fleet. The concentrated firepower of over 300 vessels reduced 3 chunks of rock, each roughly the size of a city, to their component atoms in less than 2 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. That, Vasquez said calmly, was us being polite. We could have targeted your ships instead of the rocks, but we are trying to have a civilized conversation here. However, my patience is not unlimited, and neither is my willingness to demonstrate restraint. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any scream. You have 30 seconds to begin your retreat, or we will show you what human warfare actually looks like. And Admiral, when I say 30 seconds, I mean 30 seconds. Not 31. Not 29 and a half. 30. Exactly. The countdown began immediately, displayed on our screens in human numerals that somehow seemed more ominous than our own script. 29. 28. 27. Vorthak looked around the bridge, his crimson eyes wide with something I had never seen in a Zelathi commander before. Absolute terror. 24. 23. 22. Sir, I whispered, we should retreat. This is not a battle we can win. 20. 19. 18. Retreat? Vorthak's voice cracked. The Zelathi Dominion does not retreat. We are warriors. We are conquerors. We don't run from primitive mammals. 15. 14. 13. But even as he spoke, I could see the truth in his eyes. We weren't facing primitive mammals. We were facing something that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things bigger, stronger, and meaner than itself, and it had gotten very, very good at it. 10, 9, 8. All ships, Vorthak finally commanded, his voice hollow with defeat, prepare for immediate withdrawal. 7, 6, 5. The human fleet held position, weapons trained on us with mechanical precision. No one moved. No one wavered. They simply waited for our decision like patient predators. 4, 3, 2. Execute withdrawal. Vorthak screamed. 1. The last thing we saw before our ships engaged their hyperdrive systems was Admiral Vasquez's face on the main screen, still wearing that terrifying smile. Wise choice, Admiral, she said. But remember what you learned here today. Remember it, and make sure the rest of the galaxy learns it too. The screen went dark as we jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the most humiliating defeat in Zelathi history. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was just the beginning. Because 3 cycles later, someone else decided to test humanity's resolve. The Korvan Empire, with their bioships and living weapons, thought they could succeed where we had failed. They were wrong, so very catastrophically wrong. And that's when we learned that the 17 supercarriers we had faced weren't humanity's main battle fleet. They were just the home guard. The Korvan Empire made their move exactly 73 standard days after our humiliating retreat from Earth. And by the bleeding void they made it count. I was stationed on monitoring duty at Outpost Gamma 7 when the first reports came in. The Korvans had hit 3 human colonies simultaneously with their biofleet. Those nightmare ships that looked more like massive sea creatures than proper warships. Unlike us, they didn't bother with warnings or ultimatums. They just arrived, deployed their flesh-eating spores, and watched entire worlds die screaming. The colonies of New Perth Haven's Gate and Prosperity Ridge were gone within hours. Not conquered. Not occupied. Gone, consumed down to the bedrock by Korvan bioweapons that turned everything organic into gray sludge. Brilliant tactical thinking. General Cathara had sneered during the emergency briefing. Hit the humans where they are weak. Show them what real warfare looks like. Perhaps now they will understand that their little parlor tricks won't work against a truly superior species. I kept my mouth shut, but my spine ridges were twitching with unease. Something about this felt wrong. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority just months ago, and now 3 of their colonies had fallen without a single distress call getting out. The answer came 18 hours later when every communication array in the sector suddenly lit up with an incoming transmission. Not from the human colonies, which made sense since they were all dead. This was coming from deep space, from coordinates that showed nothing but empty void on our sensors. The transmission was being broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, which should have been impossible with standard communication equipment. But then again, we were dealing with humans, and impossible seemed to be their specialty. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying. This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Expeditionary Force. The unprovoked attack on our colonies constitutes an act of genocide under the Terran War Crimes Code. The Korvan Empire has been designated as a hostile entity, and appropriate measures will be taken. All neutral parties are advised to maintain a minimum safe distance of 50 light-years from any Korvan holdings. This is your only warning. General Cathara had laughed at that transmission. Actually laughed. 50 light-years? She'd cackled. What do they think they are going to do? Drop stars on them? As it turned out, that wasn't far from the truth. The human response began 36 hours later, and it redefined everything we thought we knew about warfare. It started when the Korvan homeworld of Nethys Prime simply vanished from all sensor readings. Not destroyed, not damaged. Vanished. One moment it was there, a thriving world of 12 billion Korvans with orbital defense platforms that could repel any known weapon system. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and confused radiation signatures that made our instruments weep electronic tears. Equipment malfunction, General Cathara had declared. Sensor ghosts. The planet is still there. But it wasn't. 3 different deep space monitoring stations confirmed it. Nethys Prime had ceased to exist along with its entire population, its moon and approximately half of its asteroid belt. The only thing left behind was a perfectly spherical void in space that seemed to drink light like a hungry mouth. That's when the Korvan fleet commanders started screaming for help. The humans hadn't just attacked their homeworld. They had somehow simultaneously struck at every major Korvan military installation across 17 systems. Biofoundries that had taken centuries to grow were reduced to molecular dust. Living warships that had been the terror of 3 sectors were found drifting in space, their organic hulls showing signs of rapid cellular breakdown that our scientists couldn't explain. Impossible, General Cathara had muttered, staring at the tactical displays. No fleet could cover that much territory that quickly. The distances involved would require— She'd trailed off as the implications hit her. The humans hadn't sent their fleet to attack 17 systems simultaneously. They had positioned their fleet in 17 systems before the Korvans had even launched their first assault. They had known, somehow the humans had known exactly when and where the Korvans would strike, and they had prepared a response that made our own defeat look like a gentle diplomatic rebuke. But that was just the opening move. The real horror began when Admiral Vex Thlur, commander of their third biofleet, made the mistake of trying to negotiate. His transmission was intercepted and rebroadcast across every communication channel in known space, probably so everyone could witness what happened to species that thought genocide was an acceptable opening gambit. Human Admiral Kane, Vexthal's voice carried the desperation of someone who had just realized that his prey had very sharp teeth. "We are prepared to discuss terms for a cessation of hostilities." The response came from Fleet Admiral Kane himself, and his voice carried none of the diplomatic courtesy that Admiral Vasquez had shown us. This was the voice of someone who had moved beyond anger into something far more dangerous. Cold, calculated fury. Admiral Vexthal. Kane's voice was like Arctic wind cutting through metal. 3 hours ago, your species murdered 4.7 million human civilians, including women, children, and elderly non-combatants. You used biological weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. You turned living worlds into abattoirs. Did you really think we would be interested in negotiations? The transmission included visual data, and seeing Fleet Admiral Kane was almost as disturbing as listening to him. Where Admiral Vasquez had looked like a professional soldier, Kane looked like violence given human form. His gray hair was cropped military short, his scarred face suggested a lifetime of personal combat, and his dark eyes held the kind of emptiness that came from seeing too much death. We were following standard Korvan doctrine, Vexthu stammered. The elimination of enemy populations is an accepted part of warfare in our culture. Your culture, Kane replied, and now his voice carried a tone that made my blood freeze in my veins, is about to become extinct. You want to talk about doctrine? Let me explain human doctrine when it comes to genocide. The main screen shifted to show a tactical display of the local galaxy, with Korvan holdings highlighted in red. As we watched, those red indicators began winking out, one by one in perfect sequence. When someone commits genocide against human civilians, Kane continued, we don't just retaliate. We don't just seek proportional revenge. We make sure that the species responsible never gets the chance to commit genocide again, ever. Vexthal's bioship, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a whale and a nightmare, was trying to flee toward the edge of the system. But something was wrong. The living vessel was moving sluggishly, its organic hull showing signs of decay that shouldn't have been possible. What have you done to my ship? Vexthal demanded. Kane's smile was visible on the transmission, and it was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen on any sentient being's face. We have introduced a little modification to your biotechnology, he explained with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. You see, humans have been studying biological warfare for a very long time, much longer than your species has existed, and we have developed some interesting innovation. The Korvan bioship was dissolving, not being destroyed by weapons fire, but actually dissolving as its living tissue broke down at the molecular level. Vexthal's screams echoed across the communication channel as his vessel literally died around him. We call it the Grey Death, Kane continued, his voice never losing that awful casual tone. It's specifically designed to target Korvan biotechnology. Very precise, very thorough, and completely irreversible. We released it into your homeworld's atmosphere about 6 hours ago. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just destroyed the Korvan homeworld. They had poisoned it with something that would kill every piece of Korvan biotechnology in the galaxy. You are monsters, Vexthu gasped as his ship continued to dissolve around him. No, Kane replied, and his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any scream. We are humans. And you just learned why every predator species in our home galaxy learned to fear us long before we developed spaceflight. The transmission cut off as Vexthal's bioship finally succumbed to the Grey Death, leaving behind nothing but organic slurry and the echo of his final screams. But Kane wasn't finished. Attention all species monitoring this transmission, he announced, and now the visual showed him standing on what was clearly the bridge of a warship that made the Defiance look like a shuttlecraft. The Korvan Empire has been designated as an extinct threat. Any species found harboring Korvan refugees, providing aid to Korvan survivors, or attempting to preserve Korvan biotechnology will be considered complicit in genocide and will be dealt with accordingly. The bridge behind him was a monument to human military engineering. Crew members numbered in the thousands, working at stations that stretched beyond the camera's range. Weapon displays showed armaments that our computers couldn't even classify, and the sheer scale of the operation was staggering. "This vessel is the Eternal Vigilance," Kane announced. "Flagship of the human First Fleet. We are currently en route to sterilize the remaining Korvan holdings. But I wanted to take a moment to address a common misconception that seems to be spreading through the galaxy." He walked closer to the camera, and his scarred face filled the screen. "Some species seem to believe that humanity is just another aggressive race that can be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred through superior firepower. This is incorrect. When you threaten human civilians, when you commit genocide against our people, when you use weapons designed to maximize suffering, you don't just make enemies of our government or our military." His dark eyes seemed to look directly at each of us watching the transmission. "You make enemies of our entire species. And humans as a species have certain characteristics that you might want to consider before planning your next aggressive action." The display behind him shifted to show a star map, highlighting human space. But instead of the small cluster we had expected, human territory stretched across nearly a quarter of the galaxy. "We are patient," Kane continued. "We will wait decades for the perfect moment to strike. We are thorough. We will hunt down every last member of a threat species across multiple star systems. We are innovative. We will develop new weapons specifically designed to counter your defenses. And most importantly, we are persistent." The star map zoomed in to show individual systems, each one bristling with defensive installations that dwarfed anything the Zelathi or Korvans had ever constructed. When humans decide that a species needs to be extinct, that species becomes extinct. Not defeated, not conquered. Extinct. We will erase you so thoroughly that future archaeologists will debate whether you ever existed at all. He stepped back, and the camera pulled out to show the full scope of the Eternal Vigilance's bridge. The scale was mind-numbing. This wasn't just a warship, it was a mobile civilization dedicated entirely to warfare. The Korvan Empire killed 4.7 million humans. In response, we are going to kill every Korvan in the galaxy. All 12 billion of them. This is not revenge. This is not justice. This is pest control. The transmission ended, leaving every monitoring station in the sector sitting in stunned silence. General Cathara was the first to speak, and her voice carried none of its earlier arrogance. "How many ships did we count in their defensive fleet?" she asked quietly. 17 supercarriers, I replied, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "And that was just their home guard?" she whispered. "What do you think their actual battle fleet looks like?" The answer came 3 days later, when the human First Fleet finished sterilizing the last Korvan stronghold. Our deep space monitors counted the vessels as they departed the former Korvan Empire. 237 supercarriers, each one larger than anything in our fleet. Each one crewed by thousands of humans who had just demonstrated what their species did to genocidal enemies. And according to the intercepted communications, the First Fleet was only one of 7 human battle fleets. General Cathara had retired immediately after seeing those numbers. She'd submitted her resignation with a simple note: "I refuse to be responsible for the extinction of our species." I understood her reasoning. The Zelathi Dominion had conquered 47 worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. The humans had conquered a quarter of the galaxy through something far more terrifying. They had turned warfare into a science and extinction into an art form. But the worst part wasn't the scale of their military might. It wasn't their technological superiority or their strategic brilliance. The worst part was the growing realization that we still hadn't seen everything they were capable of, because 6 months after the Korvan extinction, we detected something that made no sense. Human vessels were gathering at the edge of the galaxy, not for conquest or defense, but for something else entirely. They were building something in the void between galaxies. Something massive. Something that required the combined efforts of all 7 human battle fleets. And when we finally figured out what it was, we understood why every species in the galaxy had suddenly developed a desperate interest in peaceful coexistence with humanity. They weren't just defending their territory anymore. They were preparing for something much bigger than any of us had imagined. The truth came to us through a dying Korvan scientist named Vorth Kess, one of the last survivors of his species who had managed to hide in an abandoned research station at the galaxy's edge. He contacted me directly, bypassing all official channels because he had information that he claimed would change everything we thought we knew about humanity. Korvash, his voice was barely a whisper through the encrypted channel. You have to warn them. All of them. Every species in the galaxy. I was alone in my quarters when the transmission came through, having been demoted to intelligence analysis after our defeat at Earth. The Zelathi military hierarchy didn't appreciate officers who suggested caution when dealing with humans. Warn them about what? I asked, though part of me already suspected I didn't want to know the answer. The humans, Vorth Kess wheezed, his biosuit failing as the Grey Death continued its work. They are not from this galaxy, Korvash. They never were. The words hit me like a plasma bolt to the chest. What are you talking about? Our deep archives, he gasped, fighting to get the words out before his species' final extinction. Records going back 50,000 cycles. We found references to them. Ships matching human-designed signatures. Battle tactics identical to what they used against us. Korvash. They have done this before. To entire galaxies. My blood turned to ice as the implications sank in. That's impossible. Our surveys show they evolved on Earth. Their biology is consistent with their homeworld's ecosystem. Terraforming, Vorth Kess managed to laugh, though it sounded more like dying gasps. They didn't evolve there, Korvash. They made it their home. Earth is just their latest staging ground. The transmission quality was degrading as his equipment failed, but his next words came through with crystal clarity. They are galaxy killers, Korvash. They move in, establish a foothold, wait for local species to develop enough to pose a threat, then they cull everything that doesn't serve their purposes. We found records of 3 other galaxies where this exact pattern played out. But why? I asked, though I was already beginning to understand the horrifying logic. Population control, Vorth Kess whispered. They can't allow any species to develop beyond a certain technological threshold. Can't risk anyone becoming capable of challenging them, so they pose as a developing species. Let everyone reveal their capabilities, then they systematically eliminate anything that might eventually become a threat. The transmission cut to static, and I knew Vorth Kess had become another casualty of humanity's thoroughness. But his words echoed in my head as I stared at the data he had transmitted in his final moments. Archaeological records, stellar formations that suggested massive industrial projects, energy signatures from dead galaxies that matched human technology, and most damning of all, linguistic patterns that showed human languages were far older than their supposed civilization. I should have reported this immediately to High Command. Should have followed protocol and let my superiors decide how to handle this information. Instead, I spent the next week diving deeper into the data, cross-referencing it with our own historical records, and slowly piecing together a picture that made every previous horror pale in comparison. The humans hadn't been preparing for war with other species in our galaxy. They had been preparing for the next phase of their galactic cleansing cycle. And that massive construction project they were building in the void between galaxies. It wasn't a weapon. It was a gate. The realization hit me just as every alarm on the monitoring station began screaming simultaneously. Every deep space sensor array in our network was detecting the same impossible phenomenon. Space itself was tearing open at the edge of our galaxy. The gate was activating. I rushed to the main communications array and opened an emergency channel to every species' diplomatic frequency. If this was really humanity's endgame, then our ancient rivalries and territorial disputes suddenly seemed laughably insignificant. This is Intelligence Analyst Korvash of the Zelathi Dominion. I broadcast, knowing that this transmission would probably end my career and possibly my life. Emergency priority to all species. The humans are not what they appear to be. They are an extragalactic species with a history of systematic genocide on a galactic scale. They are currently activating some kind of massive gateway technology, and based on available data, they are preparing for the next phase of their expansion cycle. The response was immediate and predictably skeptical. The Zelathi Empire accused me of spreading panic propaganda. The Crystal Collective dismissed my claims as the desperate lies of a defeated species. The Eternal Republic suggested I was suffering from combat stress syndrome. But the Void Watchers listened. They were the oldest known species in our galaxy. Ancient beings who had spent millions of cycles observing deep space phenomena. Their response came through encrypted channels that were older than most civilizations. Korvash of the Zelathi. Their message began, "We have been monitoring the human activities you describe. Our archives contain references to similar events in neighboring galactic clusters. We concur with your assessment. Humanity represents an extinction-level threat to all indigenous species." Finally, someone believed me. But their next words shattered any hope I might have had. "However, we must inform you that our analysis suggests resistance is futile. Based on the scale of their construction project and the energy signatures we have detected, humanity's technological capabilities exceed anything in our galaxy by several orders of magnitude. We estimate their fleet strength at over 50,000 vessels of capital ship classification." 50,000. The number was so large it became meaningless. Our entire galaxy might have a few hundred capital ships spread across all species combined. "We are implementing Protocol Omega," the Void Watchers continued. "All Void Watcher installations are being evacuated to the periphery galaxies. We recommend any species capable of intergalactic travel do the same. This galaxy will not be habitable for indigenous life within the next solar cycle." That's when the second wave of alarms began. The massive gate structure at the galaxy's edge was fully active now, and things were coming through. Not ships. The word ships was inadequate for what emerged from that tier in space-time. These were mobile worlds, artificial constructs the size of moons that bristled with weapons systems that made our most advanced technology look like stone knives. They moved with purpose and precision, spreading out across the galaxy's edge in a formation that suggested they had done this many times before. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the humans themselves. Because as our sensors analyzed the approaching fleet, we realized that the humans we had been dealing with, Admiral Vasquez, Fleet Admiral Kane, their entire civilization, had been just the advanced scouts. The real human population was aboard those moon-sized vessels, and the numbers were staggering. Trillions of them, an entire species so vast that they had to spread across multiple galaxies just to have room to exist, and every single one of them was part of a civilization that had turned conquest and genocide into the foundation of their culture. The final transmission came from Admiral Vasquez herself, broadcast from the bridge of something that was less a ship and more a mobile planet. The Defiance, which had seemed so massive when we first encountered it, was now revealed to be nothing more than a shuttlecraft compared to the vessels of the human main fleet. "Attention, all indigenous species of Galaxy 7 Alpha." Her voice carried the same professional courtesy it had displayed during our first encounter, but now I understood the casual confidence for what it really was. The attitude of a predator that had never encountered prey capable of meaningful resistance. "The Terran hegemony is initiating Standard Colonization Protocol 7. You have one standard solar cycle to evacuate your homeworlds and relocate to the designated preservation zones in the galactic periphery. Species that comply will be allowed to maintain limited autonomy under Terran supervision. Species that resist will be classified as hostile and dealt with accordingly." The display behind her showed a map of our galaxy, but it looked nothing like the territory charts we were familiar with. Instead, it was divided into neat sections labeled with human designations: Agricultural Zone, Industrial Zone, Military Testing Range, Recreational Hunting Preserve. Our entire galaxy had been reduced to a resource allocation chart. "Please understand," Vasquez continued, "this is not a negotiation. This is not a conquest in the traditional sense. This is a scheduled expansion phase that has been planned for the past 2,000 years. Your compliance or resistance will not change the outcome, but it will determine whether your species survives the transition." She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display changed to show detailed population estimates for every species in the galaxy, along with projections for optimal sustainable numbers under human management. The Zelathi Dominion, which had once ruled 47 worlds, was listed as having a sustainable population of 12,000 individuals, to be maintained as a cultural preservation exhibit in the Outer Rim territories. The human approach to galactic management is based on millions of years of experience. Vasquez explained with the tone of someone giving a routine briefing. We have found that indigenous species function best when their populations are maintained at levels that prevent the development of advanced military technology while allowing for cultural continuity. In other words, they were going to turn us into pets. Exotic creatures to be displayed in carefully managed habitats while humanity stripped our galaxy bare of resources. For those species considering resistance. Vasquez's tone remained perfectly pleasant. Please review the recent Korvan incident. They chose to fight, and their species is now extinct. This was not cruelty or excessive force. This was simply efficiency. Dead species require no resources for management. The transmission included live footage from former Korvan worlds, now lifeless rocks being systematically mined by human industrial vessels. Every trace of Korvan civilization had been erased, leaving behind nothing but empty worlds ready for human colonization. You have one solar cycle, Vasquez repeated. Use it wisely. The transmission ended, leaving our galaxy in stunned silence. But the silence didn't last long. Within hours, every species with interstellar capability was transmitting on every available frequency. Some were surrendering immediately, begging for mercy and promising complete compliance. Others were desperately trying to organize resistance coalitions. A few were simply screaming. I sat in my quarters, staring at the data that painted a picture of such overwhelming futility that resistance seemed not just impossible but almost insulting to suggest. Humanity had been playing a game that lasted millions of years and spanned entire galactic clusters. They had refined conquest into a precise science, genocide into an administrative procedure, and the management of entire civilizations into a routine bureaucratic function. We had thought we were apex predators, rulers of the galaxy, masters of war and conquest. In reality, we had been nothing more than temporary inhabitants of a galaxy that humanity had marked for colonization before our species had even developed fire. The most terrifying part was the casual efficiency of it all. They weren't angry at us. They weren't driven by hate or vengeance or any emotion we could understand. We were simply in their way. And they were going to move us with the same detached professionalism that a farmer shows when clearing a field. As I write this final report, human vessels are already beginning their systematic occupation of key strategic systems. They are not bothering with battles or sieges. They simply arrive, inform local governments of the new management structure, and begin implementing their colonization protocols. Species that comply are being relocated to the preservation zones with efficient, almost gentle handling. Species that resist are simply erased from existence with the same casual thoroughness they showed the Korvans. The galaxy as we knew it is ending. Not with a war, not with a cataclysm, but with the arrival of a species so far beyond us technologically and strategically that resistance is literally meaningless. And the most horrible truth of all. This has happened before, multiple times, across multiple galaxies. And it will happen again, because humanity has turned the systematic colonization of entire galactic clusters into their species' primary survival strategy. We thought we were meeting another intelligent species. Instead, we encountered the most successful apex predator in the known universe. And now we understand why the void between galaxies is so empty. Humanity has been there already. This is my final report, as an intelligence analyst. Tomorrow I board a transport to Preservation Zone 7, where the remaining Zelathi population will be settled into our new homes under human supervision. We will be safe there, cared for, maintained as living examples of our species' cultural heritage. We will also never be free again. But at least we will be alive, which is more than can be said for the Korvans. End transmission.